So now we're going to move into burst, gate, and random. I felt like these ones were important to have their own video because there's just so much you can do with it, and they're all very related to each other in how they work. So let's dive into it. I'm going to bring up my sequence here, and actually I'm just going to clear everything out and start on A so we know exactly where we're going. So we're going to start ourselves a pattern, and first, let's just say I want to generate a random pattern. So to generate a random pattern on an entire variation, you just hold random and then press the variation you'd like to generate it on. This is going to create a random pattern on every single track, and it's going to be super chaotic, but it can be useful for certain use cases. Let's clear this out. We'll go back to our kick drum, and now let's say I just want to do a hi-hat. So we'll hold random, and we'll press the track that we want to have a random track on. So we'll do the same thing for our architect because that's always fun. And I did it with both the both the step input and the reset input, so just kind of messing around with different things. You can hit it as many times as you want while you're holding it, and it'll always generate a new random rhythm. So that's random pattern generation, just a quick way to just randomly throw data down onto a track or an entire variation. Moving more into the random mode, let's check out the probability features. So this one I'm going to try and make as simple as possible, and just bear with me because it's a lot of information. So we're going to start with our hi-hat track. You can see I've got my hi-hat track out here. That was something I randomly generated. If I want to go into random mode, I just press it, and now I'm inside of random mode. You can see in the current step window it says 10. This means I can assign 10% probability that an action will happen to a step. I can move that by going through here and saying 10, 25, 50%, 75. I've also got groups. So these ones are single. Every time the step is recalled, the flip of the coin happens saying this step is either going to be on or off. If you're in a group, see A, B, C, and D, if you're in any of those groups, that means that that coin toss is going to happen at the beginning of the variation, meaning that all steps will be treated with the same probability. So first we're just going to go through and assign probability to all of these steps. We'll say 50% of the time. I just want all these steps to happen randomly. So we'll just swipe here, and you can see that they're all flashing. If the LEDs are flashing, that means that the current value in this window is on these steps. So right now, all of these have data, but they're just going to happen 50% of the time. If I scroll through here, I can see that they're bright. That means that there is data there, but it's not necessarily the data I'm looking at. So I can change things like now these steps are only 25%. These steps are going to be 75%. So that's how you can distinguish between which steps you're looking at and which random and probability settings you're looking at. If we go into the group setting, I'll just show you real quick. We'll go into group B. This is 50%, and I'm going to make each one of these steps assigned to this 50%. So now every once in a while, all of these steps are going to go off together. So you hear they all go off, now they're off, now they're off. They're all on, now they're off again. So you can hear that these are happening at the beginning of the phrase. If you just want to turn off the pattern data but leave the step, just press the button again and it'll be dim. If it's dim, that means that there's step data there that's always going to happen. It doesn't have random or anything applied to it. We can also use clear here and just clear these steps, and that means you're actually going to clear the entire step of all of its data. So to go further in, we're going to do even more group stuff. So you can see here I'm on group B. Let's say I want B to be a different value. Right now it's set to 50%, but I want it to be 75. All I have to do is just press encoder 1 and I can choose which selection I'm on, right? So I've got 10%, 25, 50, 75, or I can get into here and I've got B of A. So what this means is that anything assigned to B is not going to happen unless A is not happening. So we'll go to A here. We'll say A is a 50% chance that A happens, and we'll assign any step that's off to group A. So now any step that's assigned to group A is going to happen 50% of the time, and whenever A steps are not happening, B steps are going to happen. So that's a cool way to make some steps happen and some steps not. You can do this in between tracks and stuff like that. All of it's you're able to group between, you know, the full set of tracks. If you want to assign a random probability setting to an entire track, just go to that track and just hit the track button. Now all steps on that track will adhere to that group. You can turn it off just by hitting the track button again. So random also has a layer 2 to it. This is crazy and it's super fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear my hi-hat track and I'm going to make 16th notes with no probability, right? So now I have data here that says just trigger, 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 trigger on my last 4 steps. So I'm going to go into random mode and I'm going to say group A, 50% of the time, these steps will happen. So all 4 of these steps are assigned to group A. So that means that when it gets to it, they might all play or they might all not play. To go into layer 2, I can actually assign an action that they can go between. So instead of just on and off, I'm going to say that they're either going to trigger or they're going to burst. So we'll just say, we'll hit encoder 2 here, press encoder 2. That brings us into the second layer. We can move encoder 1 and say, I want it to either be a burst or go all the way up into gate territory. So I'm just going to go into bursts, and now I'm going to assign layer 2 to these 4 tracks. So now every once in a while, we're going to get 4 triggers, and every once in a while, we're going to get our bursts. So this is super useful for using, like, for doing this kind of trappy hi-hat kind of thing, and you don't really want to just say it's going to happen here. You know, you can make it just randomly hit the traps, more like a, I don't know, drummer with too much time on his hands, right? All right, so that was random mode. As you can tell, there's so much to be explored with that, and it can be used in so many different ways to just create super cool random probability kind of crazy stuff. So if you're into that, have a ball. All right, so next we're going to go into burst and gate functions. Again, I'm just going to clear the variations so we can start fresh and make ourselves a little pattern here. Turn up my mixer first. Why don't I make more of like a more of a halftime thing, just to kind of chill it out a little bit. I'm always going for that 4 on the floor stuff, so let's just smooth it out a little bit, get a little bit more R&B. So first things first, burst. I've shown you quick burst and quick gate, so that's super easy. If you haven't checked that out, go back to the compose mode video. That's super easy. Now we're going to move to the actual modes of burst and gate. So to enter, you can either hold or press. If you hold, that means it's just going to be momentary inside of the mode. So you can hold it, do some stuff, let go, you're back out. If you press it, that means that it's going to stay there. So it's just latched inside of the mode. So now we're in burst. We can go through, and just like random mode, we select which burst we want and just apply it to our steps. So I'm going to go back out here. I'm going to make myself a 4-bar pattern with my duplicate pattern length trick. I'm just going to clear out this guy. And so one really cool trick is to just hold encoder 1 and then press the steps you want to enter. And that'll enter all of those steps on every single track. So that's a really quick way just to like fill out a sequence. And then if we want to just put our bursts on page 4, we're going to go into burst mode. And we'll just assign those last 4 steps to have the 2 burst on them, 2 trigger burst. And so that's more of like our, just kind of our ending hi-hat burst. And then we'll go through and we'll do some gate mode stuff. So I'm going to go into channel 13. This is my architect. And just to make it super simple, I'm going to make this pattern length 16 steps for these 2 tracks. The other ones are still 4 steps. I just went to pattern length, hit the last step of these 2 tracks. And we're going to go into gate mode. And I'm going to say, okay, we'll start with 15% gates. And we'll make our quick little rhythm. And I'm just doing that both on the step and the reset input at the same time in order to get that kind of, in order to stay on that step 1 of Architect. So now I'm going to say I want some of these to be longer 100% gates. If you're on 100% gate, that means it's going to be tied to the next step. So it's going to slur to that next step. If you just want a long gate, but you don't want it to actually tie, go to 75%. And so now this is how we can kind of create more of like a stuttery kind of sound, is by changing up our gate lengths inside of a roll. So again, if it's flashing, that means that the value displayed on the current step window is on that step. If it's bright, it means it has some sort of gate information or burst information if you're inside of bursts. And then if it's completely off, that means that there's no data on that step. And if it's just dim, that means that that data is just regular old trigger data. So the last thing inside of burst and gate is microtiming. So in order to explain that, I'm going to go back to our hi-hat track here. And I'm going to make our pattern length 16 steps, so it's super easy just to see everything that's going on. And we're going to go to track 9, or step 9 on our hi-hat track. And if you want to enter microtiming mode, this allows you to get the full 48 ppqn resolution of our burst generator. So we're going to say, let's just do track or step 11. I'm going to hold the step, and then I'm going to hit either burst or gate. It doesn't matter which one. That takes you into microtiming mode. So right here, you were seeing which step you were currently editing. So I'm editing step 11. The rest of these just have data on them, but I'm editing step 11. And then up here is my actual microtiming information. So if I run steps completely next to each other, that's going to be a gate. So that says if they're next to each other, it says slur to it. That's just how microtiming works. So if we want to create a crazy burst sound, we can go through here, and you can hear that now, right? So we can make it sound a little bit more jumbled by moving them around. And this is also where if you wanted to make something sound a little bit more human, you could just nudge it off of the beat a little bit. Right? Just make it a little bit like late sounding. And that's just and so that's how you can do that. You can make complex bursts, or you can make your gate length custom inside of here if you just want to make a gate length that's exactly half, or, I mean, that's already in there. But if you want to just get real meticulous with your gate lengths, this is how you do it. So microtiming is just a way to make custom bursts and gates. You can get creative. You can nudge stuff with just a little bit off of the beat and just make stuff a little bit more flowy. So yeah, I mean, with all that information, I think that that's probably a good place to stop on this one. Thanks for watching. We're going to get into advanced sequencing next.